Good thing I can't see all y'all. Did you guys have a good time? Good. I can't see a single face, which is good. Otherwise, I might have stage fright. Well, it's a delight to be back in San Francisco. One of the first jobs I had after graduating from college in the spring of 1980, I wanted to get work in a law firm. I thought I'll rule that out. And I got a labor law firm. It was a management labor law firm. 100 Bush Street, Corbett, Kane, and Burke. I might have a friend or two from those days here. Anyway, it was an interesting experience. So I've been told that I should. I'm gonna play a little music for you. A lecture present. By the way, this is the amp that was in the. It's what they call the authenticating document right here. This is that's the amp that I used to use on the street in Harlem. So it still works. What I want to do is actually I want to talk a little bit about creativity, and I want to give you a little bit of a sense. Can you hear me? Is the vocal volume okay? A little bit of a sense of the sort of process. As you can see, the young whippersnapper that I was, I can't stand the young guy that Gussow was. He had a lot to learn. He finally learned a few things. One of the things I learned, I used to think that Sterling, I'd get upset because he'd play songs too long. He'd play, not just your average 2 minute and 53 second single. He'd go on and on and on. And I used to say, why won't you just end the damn song? And many years later, when I thought about him growing up in Mississippi and being in a Pentecostal church, which he was, I put two and two together and I said, wait a minute, it's about a feeling that the music is capturing and conveying and then using to uplift whoever is there with. And I said the problem wasn't that he was playing long, it was that you had mistaken ideas about what the music's supposed to do. And that's one of the things he taught me. Let's see if this, I'm going to make a note here. Okay, yeah. So when I first came down to Harlem, obviously I was your typical, I would say, young white American blues harmonica player. And by the way, 2.5 years went by between the time that the girlfriend broke the heart and the time that I showed up in Harlem to play with him. 2.5 years, narrative foreshortening has to happen to make a film kind of kick off, but just so you understand, there was an awful lot of dues paying. I'd played with several dozen guitar players in several continents, which meant I was almost ready for him. But what I still had was a sense, okay, when he says on that very first day, I got a song called Mojo, think you can do that? And I said, oh yeah, got my mojo working, right. And that's not what he played. That's, me trying to copy, Kim Wilson trying to copy Little Walter playing with Muddy Waters. And I wasn't playing Adam Gussow matching what Sterling McGee or Mr. Satan was playing. And that was one of the lessons that I had to learn was you have to let go. Eventually, what I ended up doing was doubling something that he was doing, whether it was an internal guitar line or whether it was something he was doing with his two hi-hat cymbals. But eventually I figured out that we all have kind of a musical body that's intelligent, that figures stuff out, and just let it go. So Mother Mojo, what's Mother Mojo? I'm going to just play a little bit. I don't sing that song, but I'm going to play a little bit to give you a sense of the Satan and Adam groove, which is pretty deep in me. And I play a lot these days, by the way. I'm a one-man band with a guitar player, so you may have noticed at the very end, if you were sharp-eyed, that Gussow's playing drums. Where did that come from? Last 7 or 8 years. Nothing I ever wanted to do, but suddenly there it was. So, Mother Mojo. that's the Satan and Adam groove. Thank you. That's just, it's a groove that was very big in us. Now, I want to talk about how a particular song evolved. There was one day I came up with and I brought it down to the streets of Harlem. It was the day before we played the Philadelphia River Blues Festival in 1991. The promo picture that you might have seen in the San Francisco Examiner, or Chronicle, one of the papers, that's a shot taken right after we got off stage, and I love it because it's not a pretty picture, but it's beautiful, because you see two sets of eyes, and it's sort of the same being. We were that tight. We'd just done that thing. One thing we'd done was this song, which you heard a little bit of. It's called Thunky Fang, but it began as a funky harmonica thing that I worked up, and I brought it down to Harlem. And really what it was kind of the Sanford and Son, I didn't think about it at the time, but the Sanford and Son theme sort of kind of turned inside out. So Sanford and Son, and I actually recorded that, but... Something like that, right? Well, Thunky Fang played in third position. If you're a harp player, it's the sort of minor key position. And so this is the song, but I'll play it, but before I do, I'll just say, I played it for him, and he goes, that's kind of, what is that? I said, it's just some funky thing I worked up. And he said, Thunky Fang! So he turned it around from funky thing to something that, Thunky Thing? That's it. Turn the white boy inside out, and then throw him back. So that's the song. And it's a very distinctive groove. It's not blues, which is a key thing with him and me. We didn't just play blues. We played everything that was out there on that street, a block from the Apollo. So I'm going to play a little Thunky Thing. Hope you like this. I think I better stop when I've got the groove. Thank you very much. And by the way, it's available as Thunky Fang Rides Again on Amazon and iTunes, and you can still find Mr. Satan's Apprentice. I think I probably got the 5 minutes to go signal, I'm not sure, or the 2 minutes. No, keep, okay. I think I'm just we're going to have a chance to do Q&A. This Q&A is going to come right after this, and so you'll have a chance. You'll ask me, where's the Jewish content? Of course, my father's Jewish. Rockville Center, Long Island. My mom is not. Yeah, well, the Old Testament prophet's there, right? Mr. Satan is definitely... He knew Bible backwards and forwards. It was always funny to see somebody come up to him who was of a religious bent, try to argue Bible with him. The Talmud, I mean, he could talk chapter and verse. And if they started to win, he'd go into numerology, and then nobody knew what to do. Okay, I'm going to do just a little bit of So I'm going to do a little bit of a song that I put out there. I always want to tell a story. Let me tell a brief story. I've been on YouTube with harmonica lessons since 2007. At one point, I put up a lesson about a song called Whammer Jammer by the great Jewish blues harmonica player, Magic Dick Richard Salwitz, of the J. Giles Band. And a 16-year-old African-American guy from Memphis, turned out, sort of commented and said, "Mr. Gussow, you're doing that one riff wrong." And I said, "Who's this guy?" And we became friends. I went up to Memphis and ended up coaching him, and he ended up winning a Star Search competition. His name is Brandon Bailey, and he played with Mr. Satan and me at one point. And Brandon was nice enough to give me a wooden block. He was into sort of what he called harp boxing, harmonica beatboxing, and he gave me a wooden block that I could plug into an amp, and it was sort of a primitive stomp box. It would give you a thump. And I said, thanks, and then I plugged it in and began to play, and realized that the moment I had that beat there in a loud and forceful way, I felt Sterling's presence. It was very strange. The beat plus the harmonica was much more than just the harmonica alone. And bit by bit, I became a one-man band. Within a year, I had a bass drum, I had a cymbal pedal, and I was looking for guidance. And what I realized was that I was there at Sterling's side. You know, when I first met him, he had one hi-hat cymbal and no wooden board. He was just getting into being a one-man band. His sound, the incredible polyrhythmic thing that he does, was something that he got into as I was there with him. In fact, I got sick in March of 1987, and when I disappeared for 2 weeks. I wasn't there to be his harmonica boy. When I came back, he'd added a second hi-hat cymbal on the wooden board. And so as I began to be a one-man band myself, I began to think about him, and the way that he would talk, he goes, "Man, it's hard to do what I'm doing. In fact, my feet get confused," and I think, process. So as I had a whole lot of wisdom telling me that as I moved into a new phase in my own art, there were going to be hurdles, but just be where you are. That was lived experience for me being with him while he became who he became as a one-man band. Anyway, when I do Crossroads Blues, I have a verse. My mouth's getting a little dry. I wish I had a little water, but we don't, so I'm not going to do it long. There's a verse in which I talk about Sterling McGee, because for me, Crossroads Blues is not about selling your soul to the devil. In my case, it's about beseeching, let's say, calling on your mentor and living ancestor, if you will, calling on him for guidance in a moment of transition. That's what going to the crossroads is or can be. And so when I sing about Sterling McGee in the second or third verse, you'll know what I'm singing about. So I'm just going to do a little, I'm not much of a blues singer, but I'll do the best I can and put the song across. I went down to the crossroads, tried to flag a ride. I went down to the crossroads, tried to flag a ride. Well, no one seemed to know me, everybody passed me by. You can run, tell my friend Sterling McGee. You can run, tell my friend Sterling McGee. Well, I'm waiting at the crossroads, I hope he'll wave to me. At the crossroads, believe I'm sinking down. Well, I'm standing at the crossroads, believe I'm sinking down. Well, I'm standing at the crossroads, believe I'm sinking down. All right, I think we're gonna, thank you. I think it's time for the Q&A. Thank you, guys. Thanks.
Thank you, Adam. That was amazing.
Thanks, Jay. Thanks a lot.
And can we bring Scott up, please?
So I'll take this one, right?
Congratulations, Scott.
Thank you. Good job, Adam.
So I'm going to ask you guys a few questions. Scott, thank you for an amazing film. It's like a life's work in a way, because 23 years, I mean, not many people spend that much time on any project, maybe having a kid, but, you know, can you talk a little bit about why it took so long and what evolved and how that time actually made the film so much richer?
Well, I mean, it was a risk for me because, like any filmmaker, I started out thinking I was going to follow this band that was not that well known but had a lot of character, and that I would follow them to their, of course, apex of their career. But instead what happened was they sort of had a downturn with, as you saw in the movie. So at that point it was sort of a decision to continue to make the movie or to wrap it up and do a short. But I had faith in these guys, and I had faith in Sterling, that he would open his life up to me. I felt like I owed it to him to continue. And that was one of the biggest motivations to continue the movie.
And Adam, kind of a similar question, that when you're watching a film that spans more than 2 decades and you're like the main character, what did you learn about yourself? Just, it's almost like
I had a
keeping
lot of
a diary.
So it's the 5th time that I've seen the film, and one of the interesting things about the film is it changes every time, and I notice different things. So for example, when Sterling disappears, I'm speaking to the filmmaker's art, and you have Gussow walking in Times Square. It's amazing the composition where you have the different marquees and the banner headlines and stuff are like police, yes, no, and there's just a lot of cool stuff going on.
Out of business?
Going out of business,
Going out of
right.
business.
I mean,
Always thinking.
Always thinking, always thinking. So, honestly, I have an easier time with the guy who you got 2 years ago sitting in the dark blue shirt and these glasses, reflecting on the thing. I have an easier time with him because he's basically me than I do with the younger guy that I was. There were moments, it's just, call it youthful self-importance, where you just, there's a filmmaker. There was a filmmaker with us, but also there are moments of worry that you probably see, like when Miss Macy's acting out, and Sterling and I are both, we know it's on camera, and we're feeling protective and all that kind of stuff. You have to understand, there were many times. We fought early on. I was like, when's it going to get done?
We did fight.
We did fight. We don't fight now.
We fought. We're not fighting
now. We're brothers now.
Just want to let you know.
Brothers never fight. Kane. No, but we don't fight now because it's out there. It's done. But I got worried, honestly, more than once. I said, it's got to get done so Sterling can be at the opening night party, which he was. It worked out. Turns out I didn't have to worry all that, right?
No.
That's Sterling's lesson. So the movie speaks to me in different ways like that, but that's one of them. I don't know if I answered your question. A little bit.
Yeah, definitely.
A little bit.
So can you give us an update on Sterling? And I know he was at the Tribeca premiere.
Yeah, Sterling, we were able to get him up to the Tribeca premiere, and we put a band behind he and Adam. which was an amazing, and it was all the musicians they had known from the past in New York City. It was incredible. And then something that's not in the movie, but that we did, is we went back to Harlem, and we set up on the street, and they played again. So in the movie, you see that in 2015 or so was his last gig at his birthday, his 80th birthday. But really, the last gig was on the street in Harlem, and it was great to see people coming by, and I remember you guys, and it was a really special moment. Adam, you could probably speak a little bit to that.
Yeah, I mean, there were a couple of people who came by and recognized him. It was strange. I mean, it's strange, of course, that he's not that guy that I remember who was out there, who was all powerful and all potent, you know. So I don't know. It was great to see him and great to play with him and to realize how musical. I mean, incredibly musical. Let me just say something. This should be very obvious, but this is a film. It's called Satan and Adam. I'd love to think that it's also about me. It's really about him. And ladies and gentlemen, what can you do if you were moved by this? What can you do? You know, email Barbara Newman at the Blues Foundation and say, I just seen a great thing. And who's this? This guy deserves an award. 82 years old. I will always think. My wife, if I put on our music, she says, you get that faraway look in your eye, that look of delight. I felt it today when he was explaining what the blues were. That very funny moment when he's, you know, hey baby, why do you treat me so mean? That where he's mocking what blues might be, and then he's saying, no, the sky's blue, the sky's blue. But you listen to that, ka-chung, ka-chung, ka-chung. He did that the very first time I saw him, which was actually 3 years before I played with him. Because when I was a Columbia grad student with the girlfriend who'd yet to leave, we went out one night, and right in front of the Chemical Bank on 114th and Broadway, Sterling, I didn't know who this was, but he was playing guitar, and he had another guitar player and a drummer, and they were out there, and he was playing that groove, and I was like, oh my God. Oh my, but at that point, I had the harp in my pocket, and I didn't even pull it out, you know. A lot of dues paid. That groove that he has, but understand, he's not just an incredible guitar player who George Benson was in awe of, not just an incredible soul singer, but as a one-man band, one-man blues band, the kinds of polyrhythms that he did that you heard at the end. So I think there's a triple threat that nobody else has ever done that as a one-man. Jesse Lone Cat Fuller, good guy, he was a San Francisco Bay one-man band, but Sterling McGee, something else, so. Musical. Honor him.
Well, speaking of honors, and I think that nursing care facility man, I forgot his name.
Kevin.
I mean, can you tell us more about him? What an amazing
Kevin,
soul.
I've said this to Adam in the past, that if it wasn't for Kevin, I'm not sure we would have a movie, but I'm not sure we would have the movie that we have now. And I just feel there aren't that many people out there that would do what Kevin did. And I hope that people take away from the film that, you know, we can all do more to help each other out. And I hold this up as an example. But Kevin blew my mind. I mean, I think, you know, when you do what I do, or, you know, it's all about sort of trying to succeed, gain. You know, I was in Los Angeles trying to make movies, and here's a guy who was selfless, and I think that's to me, it's an important lesson for particularly right now. So.
Yeah. Since you did film over such a long period of time, there must be things that didn't make it into the film. And I'm wondering if you could share a couple of things that didn't make it into the film?
Well, actually, we can maybe have Adam speak on this, as the incident, the Crown Heights incident did not make it into the film, but was sort of a pivotal time.
A little, well, so there were 3 episodes of racial violence that marked New York City life between '86 and '91. The first was Howard Beach, when some Italian hoods chased a black guy across a highway and he got killed. The second was Yusef Hawkins in Bensonhurst. A young black kid went to by a car, I think, in a neighborhood. He was accused of maybe visiting a white girl in the neighborhood, and he was shot. And when that happened, I had to disappear for a couple of weeks. And the third was Crown Heights, the riots in Crown Heights, which was, of course, Hasidim and Caribbean people, as far as I know. We were out of the country. We were actually in Europe at that point. And so here we are, we've done our best. You know, sometimes we had a sense that we were trying to pull things together. We've done our best, and the country's coming apart, and you have these scenes of just horrific stuff happening back in our city while we're in Europe. Like many musicians, blues musicians in particular maybe, you sort of look overseas at a certain point. And we looked out of New York to Liberty State Park in Jersey City. Was an early attempt to sort of get out of Harlem after the bad stuff had happened. So we were always caring about home, but thinking about what was going on and looking for another place to be. It was hard coming home after that. And actually, and I forget this, when we came home after that 3-week trip, we actually had a big fight. We didn't want to talk to each other. And you can be sure that happens when you're living for real, and especially in blues acts where people are just conjuring up emotions in powerful ways. And so we had that moment. Margot, who's just, every time I see the film, I think she's so deep and so wise, the manager. She's for me, one of the highlights every time, spot on with pretty much everything. And she said, "Oh, that's all right. We've got a gig in October, the Benson and Hedges Blues Festival. He'll be back by then." And we just chilled out, and then we got back together. And that happened many times. But now it's just to see him is just to see an old friend. So
was that going to be part of the film?
It was. There was a whole scene, as Adam explains, where they return from Europe, thinking before they left that they might have been sort of a beacon of hope in their small way in a city that was sort of a powder keg at the time, and instead they come back to something that was worse. So we had to cut the scene because of story time, kind of hard to explain, but yeah, we had to get rid of that scene.
And you were one of the editors on the film too.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
We don't really know in the film how you came across them, do we?
No, I had my way of coming into it was very similar to when Adam first saw Sterling, but I saw them together. I'm from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and I had just edited a film that had won the Student Academy Award. I was the editor, and it was about a street singer in Pittsburgh. And friends of mine, since I'm a musician as well, they were like, "You have to see these two guys." They were in Rat on Home, as you saw on screen. And I didn't really want to go, but they drug me out. And the thing that struck me the most, and it really was so almost primordial, was sort of like, I wanted to do a film, but I wasn't sure what the film was going to be about. But I went in there, and it was two guys, and they sounded like 5 people. There was so much going on. It was so complex, polyrhythmic, and this Adam's lines like floating over top of these cymbal crashes, and Sterling's growly blues voice, and it was absolutely mesmerizing. I remember closing my eyes and thinking, like, what is this sound? And then opening them and seeing two people from completely, seemingly disparate, different sides of the track, whatever you want to call it, and then closing my eyes again and hearing 5 people. So at the time, I in sort of a pithy way, I thought maybe this is an allegory for American music, the black, the white, whatever. I didn't know at the time, but I think the thing that drove me the most was the sound, which was beyond anything I've ever heard for 2 people. It was absolutely amazing. So
I'll just add to that, and it's something we talked about it early on, because you very quickly sort of saw what felt to me like externals, although maybe that was just my defenses. Psychotherapists out here, I'm just being defensive, which is black and white, young and old, Ivy League in Mississippi. And what I saw was what I had lived, and what you can see in that photo that I talked about, which is, I used to say, we're two skinny, intense New York guys who like the same kind of music. Right? And we're buskers, so that we're sort of over the top. There's always a little too much, and I've learned to accept that. put a little too much out there because you're trying to stop people. And I think, the answer's that it's a tension between those two things. So you can leave this. I hope you'll say, okay, yeah, it's an odd couple story. It's Danny Glover and Mel Gibson. It's a buddy flick, and some of the time they're on the road, and of course, and Miss Macy is a key thing. It's the what each of them is not, and they're complementary. But it's also about a musical partnership, and it's about one sound. And if you listen to the music that he's used in the film of ours, it's one sound, and that to me is important too. It's not that the other things, and they're not strictly speaking externals, right? Because America is a troubled place, and so when I walk down the street, I may be taken in a whole bunch of different ways, and depending on neighborhood too, than he is. So I understand they're not just externals, but I'm also 10 years older than he was when I first met him. So we have things in common too. We're both getting older.
Have you seen Miss Maisie recently?
No, she passed away. I actually, I didn't see her in the later days, even though she actually lived on the street for a period of time in Gulfport, Florida, and then eventually was brought into the nursing home, at which point, or Social Security facility, at which point she was across the hall from him. And he'd joke about it, I can't get rid of her, that kind of, but they loved each other to the end. There was a partnership there too. I have not seen her. She and I didn't always get along, let's just put it that way.
Yeah, I had a feeling.
Yeah.
Neither did they.
Neither did they. And he would constantly look to me, Mr. Adam, what am I going to do? My crabby little, it was that kind of a thing. When there's three of you and you're on the road, it's a band, and she's part of the band. Yeah.
So we have time for a couple of questions. Let's open it up to our audience.
I'll let you pick. Oh, good.
Oh, what a terrific movie. What a great movie.
Thank you.
I have a question. Stanley Kubrick used to quote Oscar Wilde to all of his actors and casts, and this was the quote: "The tragedy of old age is not that one is old, but that one is young." I'm asking Scott. I'm from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, too. Mount Lebanon.
Whoa.
Mount Lebanon. Very racist when I grew up. One black
very
man,
much so.
Very racist. But what is your next project? Are you working on something? Are you working on something musical or follow-up to this? Or are you just promoting this at the moment? What do you have in your mind?
Well, the film has just come out. It first premiered at Tribeca in New York in
April.
The end of April. So it's sort of new, and I don't have another 23 years. But I will say this, that I'm pretty dedicated to making another film, making sure that there's music in it, and I'm also wanting to do a feature film that's also involves music. I think I'm going to stay around music, race issues, that kind of thing.
Thank you for that. I have a burning question, which is, where did you, Adam, find Sherry? And how did you find the response to you at Ole Miss? My God, that was quite a photo for those of us almost 80, and that would be me. That was really very moving to me. And are there other interracial marriages in the professor world there now?
Yeah, there's a few. There's a few.
My
I don't know.
grandfather's also from Mississippi, so this.
So if you're 80, so I taught a course on Freedom Summer at one point. If you're 80, you remember what happened in Mississippi in 1964, and it was a pretty national movement of young people, mostly white, but not entirely, who descended on the state to try to crack it open because it was the most remaining, in terms of racial issues, it was the worst. Mississippi these days is very different. It's very different. I met her on Match.com. We're a Match.com success story. She was my first date on Match.com, and she was the right woman after all those years.
You're bold man.
So I'm being honest. You asked, and honesty, if I can, is my way. So that's where we met. We have a 12-year-old son who you could see, Sean, who plays 6 instruments. So the response, he's always asking me to buy or rent him a new instrument. I think he's going to be a conductor or a band teacher. And he's playing alto now. I showed him some blues heads, and suddenly he learned the blue note. So, but what's the response? The response, the university is a very progressive place, University of Mississippi. I realized, even as I say that may strike some people as surprising, because all you know maybe is James Meredith and that it wasn't a progressive place. But these days it is. And it scores extremely high in terms of satisfaction of the employees who work there, not just faculty, but employees. My wife, who's from Dallas, she's from South Dallas, Duncanville area, I think. Not Duncanville, close. She moved there when we got engaged, or actually when we got married. And so we've been there since 2007, but together since 2002, really. And Mississippi has been very good to us. We have had no overt problems of any sort. And of course, she's not looking for covert problems, but I'm looking for covert problems, and I don't really see them either. So surprisingly, it's been a very good place to bring up our son. And that it might surprise people. It's a red state. This is a blue city and state, but it's been a very good place that way, I'll just say. Come on down and visit.
Over there.
All right, hi. So I was wondering about, you guys mentioned that the movie showed that he lost feeling in his left hand after he had the stroke. I was wondering more if we could hear more about what his rehabilitation process was like, because I know that I play guitar, and I know that feeling is 100% of how you approach it. So if he lost that feeling, but then was able to come back to guitar, what did that look like?
I can talk a little bit about that. It doesn't look particularly good. I need to be honest. He can't do any of the virtuoso type things that he did at all. He can strum, he can make a chord, and he can strum. His wrist is not particularly fluid. He doesn't do any of the single note stuff he used to do. So for all effective purposes, he was brought down 98% in terms of guitar playing ability. And that's just the truth. He lost most of the percussion stuff, and at a certain point, we did a gig or two with him playing percussion. It just didn't work. That's why Dave came in and saved the day. One thing the movie hints at but doesn't say in so many words is that Dave died in 2011. And we thought, well, that's the end at that point, by the way. Except that at that point, I was a one-man band. I'd been one for 2 years. And somebody offered us a gig in New York. You played our wedding 25 years ago. Would you come back? And my husband will be blown away if you... And I said, we can't, lady. We just lost our drummer. And then I said, so you'll fly us to New York? And I thought, well, if we're ever going to survive, this is the moment. Let's see if we can do it. And we did it. It's all on YouTube. You can actually find some of this stuff out there. But his guitar playing has gone way down. But his vocals are as good as they ever were. And so that's what I meant by the Satan and Adam sound found a way to survive, even in the absence of that incredible guitar virtuosity. But the rehab process, I don't know if there was much of one. I do think that they over-medicated him early, and I think that Kevin kind of backed that off a little bit. You may have noticed that he didn't seem all that bad off in those first scenes when you found him in Florida, and he wasn't in the home, right? Did you notice that? He almost seemed more relaxed and relieved. And then it was intake, and suddenly they were drugging him up, I think. But I think they backed that off a bit, yeah.
We have time for one more question.
Thank you again. Over here, to your left. Your left. That was an absolutely beautiful film. I have one little comment, but my main question is, where can we tell people they can see it? The only comment I wanted to make is about his fabulous playing. And it's nice that you mentioned Jesse Fuller, but there's also Joseph Spencer from Barbados who plays that complicated by himself. So I just thought I'd mention
Don't know
that.
him. What's his name again?
Joseph Spencer.
Joseph Spencer.
And so the question is, what's distribution, streaming, what's going on?
Well, like I said, we just released, well, we premiered in April, so it's a little early. We are playing a multitude of festivals. I was just in Ireland, and the film showed in Greece, and it's set to play at least 10 more or 15 more festivals coming up, including Barbados, which is interesting that you mentioned that. So we're still early in the process, but there have been there's been a lot of interest, but these deals, I guess they take a long time to work out, and I'm not a deal maker. But there is something being worked out, and we hope to have some sort of answer by like the fall, or maybe even closer to early December.
And it's playing tomorrow night,
Yeah,
right?
in the
at
short
Albany?
term, it's playing 2 more times at our festival.
So tell your friends.
Tomorrow at the Albany Twin, and then it's playing at the Raffel next weekend. So yeah, please come, tell your friends, and thank you both so much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Scott. Thanks.